Last year, I read a book called Retire Early with Real Estate, which has been super helpful for me and Hannah as we prepare to buy our very first rental property. And today, we're lucky to have Chad Carson with us, the author of that book. So be sure to check out Chad's channel after this video if you're interested in real estate investing, and let's see what he has to say.
So you want to buy a rental property, but you don't have enough cash? If that's you, don't worry, I've got you covered in this video because I'm going to share 7 different tips to help you save money fast so that you'll be buying that rental property and collecting cash flow before you know it. Hi there, my name is Chad Carson from Coach Carson TV. You can also call me Coach, and I've been saving up money to buy investment properties for 19 years now. But when I first started, cash was tight. And I'm talking about less than $1,000 in the bank tight. But if you're saving up money to buy your first property, it's very doable if you just learn a few tricks. So let's get started. So before we get to how to save money, you might be asking yourself a very important question. How much money do you actually need to save to buy a rental property? So I'm going to give you a couple different scenarios, but a very typical scenario is that you have to put 20% down. This just means that if a bank's going to loan you money, they want you to put 20% of your own money into the deal, then they'll loan you the other 80%. And this is what most people think about when they think about how much money to save. But I want to remind you there's also some additional costs. So you have closing costs when you buy a property. These include loan fees and attorney's fees and appraisals and things like that. They can range from maybe 2 to 3% of the purchase price. You also have repairs sometimes. So if you buy a house that's a little bit of a fixer-upper, even a cosmetic where you have to paint and do some carpet and things, you can additionally have some money for repairs. And then finally, I recommend you also set aside money as a reserve. Now, is this an absolute necessary thing? Can you get away without a reserve sometimes? Yes. But also, like having a personal reserve in your life, it gives you a rainy day cushion in case the heating and air goes out and you don't want to get into a rental property and put yourself into that kind of bad situation. So when you add all that up, let me give you an example. Let's say you're buying a $200,000 property and you put 20% down. That would be $40,000 just as a start. But then you have the 2 to 3% in closing costs. Let's say 3%, that'd be $6,000. Let's say you had $10,000 in repairs and another $5,000 in reserve. If you add up all of that in a typical situation on that price property, you'd have about $61,000. Now, is that always the way it could be? That's the typical situation. There are ways to get in with less money down, including one of my favorites, by moving into a property by getting an owner-occupant loan. So maybe you move into a duplex, or maybe you move into a house and you rent out the basement or the garage apartment or something. This is called house hacking, for those of you who hadn't heard of that, where you generate income from the house you live in. And by living in the property and also treating it as an investment, you can get a much smaller down payment. So maybe you get a 5% down payment or a 3.5%, or there are some no money down programs as well. You still have those other costs. So maybe you have, instead of $60,000, $20,000, $30,000, maybe even less to get into a property. But all of that kind of gives you a range of what you need to save in order to buy a property. So now let's look at the 7 different ways that you could actually save that money and buy your first rental property. The first tip to help you save money fast for your next rental property is to pay yourself first. Now, if you're watching this channel, I know you've heard of budgeting, where you create a plan every single month for how much you're going to spend by category. And I love budgeting. My wife and I have done budgeting in the past. We've done the cash envelope system. We've done all of that. But it can be a little bit difficult sometimes, especially if you're busy and if you're not that into budgeting. And so there's a shortcut to budgeting called paying yourself first, where you look at the amount of money you make every month, and before you spend any money, you go ahead and set aside some money into a savings account. Now, you're probably familiar with this if you have any kind of money deducted from your salary at your job. You set aside some money every month, your job does, to pay taxes, to pay your 401k perhaps, to pay your health insurance. So the idea is just to do the same thing, but for you to set that up and to set up a savings account. And there's a lot of savings accounts out there. You're not going to get a lot of interest these days. I think, Capital One. There's other ones out there as well. But you set aside that money and you automatically put it in the bank every single month. So let's say you're a family. Together you make about $90,000 per year, and that's $7,500 per month. But maybe your take-home pay after all those other deductions is $6,000. The idea would be that if you're going to save up $12,000 this year, that you go ahead and set aside $1,000 from every single monthly paycheck, or whatever your amount of paycheck is. So you have, instead of $6,000, you and your family have $5,000 to live on. And you've got to figure out how you're going to live on the $5,000. This is a discipline. It forces you to live off that amount of money. But instead of you having to think ahead of time, oh, I'm going to spend this much money on this and this much money on this, you're just forcing the issue and saying, we've got $5,000 to live on. That's it. Let's make it happen. But then when you successfully do that, by the end of the year, you have that money piling up in that savings account that you're not looking at, that you're not touching every single month. And you wake up at the end of the year and now you have your $12,000 you were saving for that you can put towards a rental property. My tip number 2 is about helping you to reduce your expenses and live off of less money so that you can do what we talked about in tip number 1 and set aside money automatically every month. Now, I'm not going to recommend that you save money on coffees or save every little penny. What I'd like to recommend is that you focus on the big 3. Now, what are the big 3 expenses? Well, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you look at some of their reports that track average spending for those of us in the United States, the big 3 are housing, your transportation, your car, and then also food. So instead of just skipping on every little thing, you can still enjoy your coffee here and there, but let's focus on the ones that we spend a ton of money on, like our housing. Housing, I think, is about 30% on average of the US budget. So if you can do things like I talked about earlier, where you do house hacking, if you can rent out the spare bedrooms on your house on Airbnb, or if you have a basement apartment, or if you have a garage apartment, or if you can convert your garage to an apartment and get some extra rental income, that could free up money from your budget that's now going to housing expenses that you could use to save for your investment property. And especially early in your career, when cash is tight and you're trying to save money, every little dollar counts. And so using your housing to its maximum is really important. Also with cars, buying new cars can be really expensive. Getting loans on cars can be really expensive. I've always gotten into the practice of buying used cars. So 5 to 7 years is kind of a nice sweet spot for me, where they've already depreciated in value from a brand new car, but they're still fairly reliable, especially good brands. I like Toyotas, that's my personal bias. But there's other reliable brands. If you study the ones that are reliable over longer periods of time, you can buy a 5 to 7 year old car and drive it for 10 years and have a much lower expense for your automobile. Now, I know the automobile lovers out there are going to say, I like my nice car, I want to do more. Well, there's time for that, right? You can buy a used car that's still nice, and then as you save up money, as you get that rental income from your properties, you can use that wealth over time to buy nicer cars. This isn't a forever thing, but saving money right now. And then third, with food, there are simple, creative ways to save money on food. I like eating at home or making a lunch if I'm going out, taking it with me. And I enjoy eating out at restaurants. My wife and I love doing that, but making that more of a special treat instead of a regular thing. Just taking some lunch from home and taking it to work in a bag or a lunchbox can save you a lot of money if you look at how much you spend eating out over time. My third tip is to pay off all of your high interest credit card debt. Now, we could have a longer conversation about whether you should pay off your home or your student loans or maybe even your car loan, but there's no doubt that paying off your higher interest debt, like a credit card or a payday loan, is imperative. It's the first thing to do. And I look at paying off debt like that as the best savings account you can have. Every time you pay off a debt, you're freeing up cash flow. You're freeing up high interest payments that you're making to a bank. And instead, you're putting that money in your own bank account. You can do a technique like a debt snowball, where you line up all of your credit card debts from the smallest debt to the largest debt. And then you attack all of your savings and put them on that one credit card at a time. You pay that one off. You free up that cash flow to now pay off the second one, and then the third one and the fourth one. And by the end, that snowball really gets rolling and you can pay it off a lot faster than you think. So whether you do a debt snowball or some other technique though, getting that paid off quickly, I think, is a first priority. It is like saving money. It'll free up cash flow to do all the other things you want to do with rental properties. My fourth tip is to create a plan for what's going to happen when you get some unexpected positive cash flow into your life. So let's say just on a small scale, maybe you get a birthday gift and somebody gives you a check, or maybe you get a bonus at work, or maybe you get an inheritance and you're fortunate enough to have a family member who left you a little bit of money. Whatever the case might be, have a plan ahead of time for what you're going to do with that money. Now, of course, if you want to be the most aggressive saving, just put 100% of that into the same savings account that you're automatically saving to every month. That might accelerate everything you're trying to do and get you there a lot faster. But you might also say, hey, I want to enjoy a little bit of this money. I want to enjoy life. This could be a long ride. Setting aside a little bit of money to enjoy. Maybe you set aside 10%, 20%, and you go just have fun with that money. No problem, but set aside a large percentage of it. Do it automatically. Have the discipline to set it aside. And one way I frame this in my own mind is that I'm not buying or just being stingy or just saving money to never enjoy my life. I'm actually buying my freedom. Every dollar that I put into a savings account that'll allow me to buy a property that's going to build wealth and produce cash flow for the rest of my life is actually me choosing to not buy something else and to buy my freedom, to buy my flexibility. And that is something that's pretty enticing if you think about the benefits over the long run. So far, my tips have been about how to reduce your expenses in order to save more money. But sometimes you have to actually increase the amount of money you make. You just can't reduce it anymore in order to accelerate how much money you save. So my fifth tip is to sell some things in your house or in your life that can help you to generate some extra money. Now, what kind of things can you sell? I know all of us, if you're anything like me, we have a basement or you have a garage or you have a closet that's full of old stuff that you don't need. Some of it's valuable and you want to save it as a memory, but there's just some junk that you could sell. Could you sell it on eBay? Could you sell it on Craigslist? Could you sell something from the garage that you haven't used in a year or two, even if it got you 10 bucks or 20 bucks or 50 bucks? We've done a lot of clean out sales in our life, and those can be like a $200 weekend. Sometimes you get a $500 weekend, and you can set that money aside into a savings account. But then there's also some bigger sales you can think about. Maybe your house or your car is a little more than what you need, or maybe a lot more than what you need. And we're in 2021 when I make this video, this is a pretty hot real estate market. So maybe for you, because you have more house than you need, you could sell your house. And often there's an exemption for having to pay taxes on it up to a certain amount if you make a profit on your house. And take that profit, buy a newer house or a smaller house that costs less money, and then you use the excess money to go invest in real estate. So that can be a great way to sell big stuff, whether a house or a car, that's more than what you need, and use those excess savings to be your seed capital to get started in rental properties. My sixth tip is another way to make extra income to accelerate your savings. This one is called a side hustle. So a side hustle just means in your extra hours of the week that you do something to earn income. Now, the best way to start with this is to think about what are the job skills you already have, either at a current job or a job you had in the past, that you can then do on the weekends. So an obvious example, my wife is a Spanish teacher. She taught as a professor at a community college. And on the weekends, she could look for people who need tutoring in Spanish. We've done that often. When we lived abroad, she would tutor people in English. So that's an example with a language teacher. But if you're a mechanic, if you're somebody who's handy and you do mechanic work during the week, could you also do that on the weekend? Or any other skill that you have at your job? That's a great place to start. Now, if your job skill at the work doesn't lend itself to going and making extra money, also just make a list of the things that you're good at. What are your skills that you also enjoy doing? And then try to think about, after you write a list of those, which one of those might be marketable? Which one could I use to help other people solve a problem, to start a little business? I know people who craft and sell their products on Etsy or at little weekend sales, like open craft markets, things like that. I know other people who have started businesses online. This YouTube channel for me is a business. It took a little time to get it going, but there's all sorts of ways. If you look up, just Google side hustle, look for different ways to do it. There are ways you can make a few extra $100 up to thousands of dollars, and it could even turn into a full-time business for you if you really enjoy it and if you really do well with it. But for now, it can help you save that extra money you need to get to buy your next rental property. My seventh and final tip is kind of like a cheat code in a video game where instead of you having to do the entire game, you can press a couple buttons and get there a lot faster. And this cheat code is partnering with other people. So a partnership essentially just means you have something that somebody else needs and they have something that you need. And by combining forces, you can do something even better together. Now, in the context of buying a rental property, let's go back to that $60,000 you need. Let's say that you have $30,000, you have a friend or a family member who has $30,000. You could partner together and then buy the deal together. So it's kind of like having one pie. I love eating pies from the South, pecan pie, sweet potato pie. Instead of having no pie, you now get half of a pie and your friend gets half of a pie, but you're able to get started instead of having to wait until later. So that's one example, just splitting it 50-50. But I also want to challenge you to think a little more creatively, think outside the box. What if you are somebody who, like me when I first started, have a lot of time and a lot of energy, but you don't have a lot of capital, you don't have a lot of money? What if you could add something else of value to another person who does have the money? So what I did in my business, I was really good eventually at finding good real estate deals. I had a lot of time and had a lot of energy. So I would go around neighborhoods, look for vacant properties. I would send letters to people. I would talk to realtors. I just hustled as much as I could. And eventually I would find properties that I could buy below the full value. It was a good deal. And then I would go to a professor that I met at Clemson University and ask him, hey, if I find a good deal that has these numbers, would you be willing to put up the money for the deal? We partnered together on those deals. What I brought to the party was sometimes a little bit of money. Let's just say, to put real numbers on this, let's say I put up 10% of the cash needed and my partner puts up 90% of the cash needed. And then I put up the deal and I'm willing to manage the property, take care of it, manage the remodel. So I'm trading my labor, my time, my energy. He's putting up more of the money. And then together, we're able to buy a deal that benefits both of us. So think outside the box when it comes to partnerships, but they're a great way to accelerate your start, to get started with a friend, with a family member. There's more details on how you communicate and how you execute that partnership, but the main concept is it's a way to help you save money faster to buy your next rental property. Applying the lessons that I shared with you in this video and doing the hard work to save that money for your first rental property can seem like a big hurdle. But I just want to encourage you that this journey you're on to buy your next rental property, or just in general to achieve more financial freedom and financial independence, is worth it. If you start slowly, it's like building a snowball. It starts getting bigger and bigger. And eventually you'll find yourself in this place where you have investments, you have savings that are paying for at least a little bit or maybe all of your lifestyle. And what do you do then? I like to talk on my channel a lot about that frees up your time to do more of what matters. Whatever that means for you, whether that's traveling, whether that's serving people in your community, whether that's spending more time with your family, doing what matters is what it's all about. And what we're talking about here, saving money, is the tool, is the vehicle to get you there. During this time that you're saving money, whether that's months or maybe a year, you're gonna have some time to learn about real estate investing. The next video that I wanna share with you is actually me teaching you how to run the numbers using a back of the envelope math. But you can also very quickly know, is this a good deal or is this not a good deal? And I'd love to see you in that next